Okay, good morning, everyone. This is panel 2B, values-based procurement. If you're here for values-based procurement, you're in the right room. My name is Drew Corbin. I'm Director of Farm Programs at Tilth Alliance, and I'm happy to introduce your panel moderator today, Elliot Smith, CEO of Kitchen Sink Strategies. Elliot's going to take it from here.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for being here. I think you can you hear us in the back? Yeah? Louder? All right, you're on notice, team. Really get in there. Thanks for being here. There's a lot of really cool conversations in rooms and in between rooms, so we're honored that you chose to be in this one with us. I'm going to introduce our esteemed panel here, and then we're going to kind of set some context before some slides and chit-chat, and then open chit-chat. That's the format today. My name is Elliot Smith. I work with Kitchen Sink Strategies. We're a small group that helps small farms connect with big buyers. And we do that work all over the US. I live in Seattle. I'm joined by Chris Iberle with the City of Seattle. Everybody's going to give a little bit more context on their own. But Chris Iberle is with the City of Seattle. We have Maressa Valliant with Eat Local First. And we have Elaine Krogfoss representing the Bainbridge Island School District. We have an empty chair for the spirit of Anthony Clark, should he arrive. Anthony Clark is an executive chef with a Good Eating Company, which is a food service management group here in town. So if he joins, we'll beckon him forward. But we're gathered here to talk today about, that sounded really wedding-like. Dearly beloved, we are gathered today to talk about a really important body of work called values-based food procurement. We're going to throw food in there, which is the work of using public and private dollars to connect buyers and sellers of food to ensure that important attributes about those foods and the businesses behind them can be protected and prioritized throughout the food system. It's about being honest with our purchases, about saying what we mean and meaning what we say when we buy food. And maybe more importantly than ever now, it's about building balanced and resilient systems throughout our food economy. And anybody was even half paying attention earlier, it's a pretty weird time to be doing this work, given the federal landscape. We had a lot of doom and gloom bullet points that we were going to share, but you've already heard them multiple times. So instead of starting there, we do want to set some context for the conversation, because it's a funky time to be talking about values and anything in the economy. So if you will, we're going to just sort of name a few things that we think are important before the slides start, and you can keep in mind and mulling over. There's a lot of wild stuff happening right now with funding from the government, challenges directly to specific efforts that are long-rooted in our region and in the country. A little reminder that this is really old work. People have been doing this for a real long time. And so we encourage you, as you hear this presentation, to think this is going to carry on for long after this administration. Maybe we ought to act like that. This work is not, the work of buying food or participating in your economy is not, and never has been, values agnostic. Historically, the way the food economy seems to function is because of corporate consolidation and federal policies that enshrine that. The values that are most prioritized in procurement are low prices, high volume, and corporate interests. Tends to be business as usual, not racial, environmental, health, or economic equity of any sort. And so focusing on supporting those other values with our purchases for food is and always has been a choice. So despite the federal policy disruptions and all the very intentional chaos and madness being sown, we're going to try to strike a balance and say, yeah, there's a lot of good stuff to be done right now by borrowing from this deep toolkit of values-based procurement. Also, just to note, the federal government is not a monolith. There's a bunch of really hardworking people who don't agree with the headlines, and there are a bunch of people who have been appointed who also don't agree on the headlines. So we might find ourselves with opportunities to talk about things that are not commonly held beliefs within the federal government. The Make America Healthy Again initiative, as complicated, I'll be as neutral as I can now, as complicated as it might be, is talking about regenerative agriculture and removing highly processed foods from schools. Personally, I can get down with both of those things. We're probably in it for different reasons, but well, at least that's the point to start a conversation. So we're fortunate to be here in Seattle, of course. We've got leaders in our city, county, and state levels who really understand this, who have been committed to this work for a long time, and are committed to specifically working on the urgent crises we're facing with navigating the climate crisis and ensuring that we can approach racially equitable outcomes. In the health and prosperity of our region, we have some of these folks and leaders on the panel and many more in the room. So we just want to sort of say, hey, this is all happening very much by design, but we have a choice in how we respond to it. So when I'm not doing food stuff, I'm often playing music. And there's a quote that's been stuck in my mind for a while that I want to offer before we turn to our panelists. It's by a trumpet player named Wynton Marsalis, and he said this probably 10 years ago. He said, "We live in a large, variegated nation of rapid and ever-changing attitudes, opinions, and ways. And it's easily possible in the euphoria of a hysterical nowness to be swept away on one of those endless waves of change and lose all connection with the deep, deep waters in which the etymology of America resides and from which our music speaks to us across generations in a steady subtone." Like music, food is one of these things that is deep and universal. And that quote reminds me that we are all part of something way, way bigger than the headlines and then the sound bites, and that we're part of that single garment of destiny that Mariah mentioned this morning. It's not a coincidence that right now everybody can close their eyes and feel in your body exactly how it felt when your mom cooked you your favorite meal or your grandma cooked you your favorite meal. That shows that the power wrapped up in this conversation of food is way deeper than any executive order could ever approach. Because food ultimately has that power to heal. So, very much in spite of the moment we're in, we're going to talk about how values-based procurement can help us remember the healing power of food. And we encourage you to ask yourself how you can yourselves use food to heal yourself, your community, and what you might learn from the values-based procurement approach we have to talk about today. So, there's my soapbox. We're going to start with Chris Iberle. You can introduce yourself a little more, and I'll do your slides.
Sure, thanks. Hi, I'm Chris Iberle. He, him pronouns. I work at the Office of Sustainability and Environment at the City of Seattle. Work on our Healthy Food in Schools initiative. I'll talk a little bit about that. Worked on the Food Action Plan update and a values-based food purchasing initiative. I also worked at the Washington State Department of Agriculture on Farm to School previous to this for about 5 or 6 years, and other local, regional, sustainable, equitable food system work. I've been tasked with giving the simplest possible explanation for what values-based food purchasing is. What does that mean? Pretty wonky. Simplest form, activities, criteria, trying to transform food purchasing choices and decisions. So supporting suppliers that contribute to the local economy and buying foods that are more sustainable, support animal welfare, racial equity, fair labor, health and nutrition, cultural relevance, and maybe even other values. Through applying criteria or activities or other methods, in addition to price. So supporting the decision-making process that uses different methods and techniques, whether you're in a public institution buying food or a private institution, but trying to center these values, which often means moving away from foods and suppliers that contribute to climate change, environmental injustice, degradation, social and racial inequities, unhealthy foods, unfair wages. And so there's a powerful opportunity here. So I put up like $6 billion, right, spent on food in King County. How do we reinvest that in a sustainable, equitable food system? So there's a big opportunity to shift, and we'll look at a couple frameworks here of like how people think about these values, and also hear examples from or rest of the panel about how we apply these values. Next one. So one example is the Center for Good Food Purchasing, definitely a national leader in this space, especially with institutional food purchasing and food service. They talk about health and nutrition, valued workforce, environmental sustainability, local economies, animal welfare. Next one. Eat Local First, you hear from Maressa in more detail about this and their values indicators here. And the next one. And yeah, so the coming out of the Food Action Plan update that was just released September 2024, we heard about 6 values from the community, from leaders and folks that we worked with, many here, on developing the plan to focus more on racial equity, environmental sustainability, local economy, fair labor practices, health and nutrition, and cultural relevance, especially through city food programs. So I'll talk about 3 different programs here that run through the city that we focus on. Just first, I work for the Office of Sustainability and Environment. So we work to ensure a clean and healthy environment for all Seattle residents. A couple different ways we do that. There's a climate and environmental justice, just amazing program and work that happens through that area of work. Greenhouse gas emission reduction, mostly through transportation and buildings. Tree and forest canopy work, and then I'll talk about some of our food policy and programs. Next one. So like I said, I work with Seattle Public Schools on the Healthy Food in Schools partnership. Kind of has 3 components: fresh fruit and vegetable program, supporting sustainable and equitable ingredients in scratch-cooked meals, and convening stakeholders and engaging folks that want to support SPS in doing more scratch cooking, doing more culturally relevant foods through a school meals and food education working group. So focusing on the fresh fruit and vegetable program, next one, sorry. So FFVP provides whole or prepared fresh fruit and vegetables free to students 3 days a week at 27 schools. Prioritizes schools with high free and reduced lunch eligibility rates, so a lot of low-income folks and families there, and also focuses on schools with majority BIPOC student populations. It's kind of a supplement or snack program to the school lunch program, and we do nutrition education through it too. It's supported by Seattle's sweetened beverage tax. Some of the values alignment that we work on is really through the work of our vendors. So we work with Cascadia Produce, Food Oasis, IRC New Roots. And what are the impacts? So values-based food purchasing, I took over time, trying to work to increase more local foods through the program, work with more BIPOC growers and producers through those vendors and suppliers, and more organically grown as well. And part of this, how do we apply these values? I mean, some was just honestly changing from 1 in 2021. There was 1 conventional produce distributor and shifting to 2, 3 different more values-aligned vendors we're able to work with really can, source and supply the products that we're looking for in order to apply and look more closely and target these values. But also working with SPS to support their purchasing decisions, develop the calendar. How can we incorporate more local into the program? They do the ordering and purchasing, and we kind of pay the invoices. And it's also not just a local program too, because it's part of the point is to expose kids to a lot of different fruits and vegetables, diversity of citrus and tropical stuff. But yeah, we can focus on local and working with BIPOC growers and organic products too. Next one. So Fresh Bucks, also through OSE. That's a program, serves 12,000 low-income Seattle households who receive $40 a month in benefits to buy fruits and vegetables, and also sweetened beverage tax supported. It works with a lot of organizations to help enroll people in the program too, community-based organizations. Next one. Works and serves 12,000 shoppers, right, that are part of Fresh Bucks. From disproportionately impact communities, so a lot of low-income folks, folks that might be, learning, start with language other than English. You can see kind of the distribution of where folks live geographically in the city too. Next one. So a lot of how we work on values-based food purchasing through Fresh Bucks is just through who are the retailers that folks can spend their Fresh Bucks at. You can see here the retailers and also how many customers shopped at those places in 2024. So independent grocers, culturally specific farmers markets, supermarkets. And the next one. So we're also just working to expand retailers regularly. We're supporting values-based food purchasing through focusing on more shopping options in underserved neighborhoods, expanding access to culturally relevant produce, If Daniel's here, oh yeah, new FreshBucks retail specialist. You might know Daniel Horst through other projects, but if you want to work more on this, he's your guy to talk to once he figures out what his job is, since he started last week. But yeah, that's part of the effort, right? Part of the strategy. And yeah, you can see here the purchasing that happens at those different retailers. Purchases at the independent grocers and farmers markets, highly locally grown, a lot of culturally relevant, organic and sustainable options. Really organic and sustainable purchasing even at supermarkets too, right? All across is where FreshBucks shoppers are spending their money, and we know those sales make a huge difference too for small businesses. And then the kind of last on-the-ground program, Seattle Farm to Preschool, provides fresh local foods and nutrition to 43 Seattle preschool sites, reaching 1,500 students. Also Sweet and Beverage Tax funded, kind of an amazing coalition. I know many of you here in the room might be part of these organizations that work on farm to preschool, make it happen. 3 main components: family food bags of fresh produce distributed to families at preschools, nutrition education, food procurement stipends too that help preschool cooks and chefs buy more local foods to put into their meals and snacks and educational activities. And great big impacts. 34,000 fresh food bags, 266 different orders, 193 nutrition education activities, just some of what Farm to Preschool accomplished last year. And some of the values-based food purchasing, values alignment impacts. So obviously a lot Washington grown, point of the program, but also working with a lot of women-owned farms, BIPOC-owned farmers, immigrant-owned farms, hyper-local King Pierce, Snohomish farmers too. And so I'll end with this initiative, kind of newer. All those programs predate this, but as kind of coming out of the food action plan, we started to look at, all right, how do we take some of those examples, those 3 and more programs of success? There's a lot of other city food purchasing programs too. How do we do more values-based food purchasing through all these different programs? There's a variety here of just a few of the different partnerships, but programs within Human Services Department, Department of Neighborhoods, Food Equity Fund grantees use money to purchase food. So yeah, how do we spread that values-based food purchasing across more programs? Again, came out of the food action plan, so just a couple different actions that we kind of see this initiative as following through on. So how do we expand values-based food purchasing through more programs? Next one. 2 components to this. Just started working across departments with different staff that help manage those programs, all the ones I talked about and more, to share best practices and tools with city staff, and especially with their partners, like many of you, that help implement these programs. I started working on core values, like what do these 6 core values mean? And then it was exciting last year to work with a great team of folks, including Tacoma Peak Solutions and other community food justice leaders here, and also doing focus groups with a lot of our contractors and partners around, again, those core values. What do they mean? How can we define them? And what does it look like to implement those in more of our programs? So working to define and look at, what does racial equity look like in food purchasing? What does that mean? How do we follow through on it? Environmental sustainability, fair labor practices, and more. And how do we apply those? Looks like a lot of different potential activities, things we can do, a lot working with our contractors and partners in the community through, a variety of different methods that we're looking at. And so I'll leave here today and start working on this report more, still drafting it, but working with Tacoma Peak Solutions and our partners on, what are these core values? What is the vision and goals for all 6 of those values? Common definitions and criteria to put into more tools and templates, kind of purchasing resources, both for city staff, but also partners to use, particularly to implement, right? What does implementation of these values look like? And working on tools and resources. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Maressa.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, everyone. My name's Maressa. I'm with Eat Local First, and the Eat Local First is a collaborative group of 6 different organizations around the state. Can everybody hear me okay? Is that better? Okay. Go ahead. So we're made up of 6 different organizations around the state, and I think it's worth mentioning that that group came together during COVID, during a time of trauma, which I'm feeling a little right now. So I'm trying to remember that in these times, really good things can come out of that. So during COVID, the Local First Collaborative was formed. We pulled together our resources, which weren't enough to accomplish much on their own, but when we pulled them together and leveraged them, we could make a big difference. And so, go ahead, yep, thank you. And I was thinking this morning, Chris, you may have heard Chris mention that he was working in WSDA farm to school programming before his current position. And one of the last things that you did was work to initiate a contract with WSDA to build the pilot wholesale finder. He was like, hey, what you did with the CSA finder, can we do that for farm to school? The farm to school program was working out of a Excel spreadsheet, I believe, to track farms that schools could source from. And so we said, sure, let's see what we can build, and we built a pilot wholesale product finder. We had the Washington Food and Farm Finder, which currently has over 2,000 listings of mostly small and medium scale producers across the state, as well as farmers markets, co-ops, local food businesses that also source from local producers. But we started building in some additional ways to collect data on which farms were interested in selling to schools, because at the time it wasn't actually financially a viable situation. And so we've been doing this work for a long time, but collecting data and building out this resource to find out how we could express to school food service what's available. You may also remember during COVID, there was a lot of funding that started coming through federal channels to support local procurement in schools, and schools are applying for these funds, and they were getting them and going, great, let's do it. Now, how do I buy from local farms? Which ones? And so that was really the impetus for the development of this wholesale product finder. And go ahead. The next round of development for that involved some very extensive stakeholder surveys. We reached out to producers, we reached out to buyers of all scales, everything from restaurants to co-ops to institutions. We worked with folks like Elliot and Chris and Charlie's, and we wanted to find out what can we do to make it easier to procure local foods. So we did some very extensive surveys. What we found out was not surprising. People wanted to know how they could identify what products were available. And so we collected all of that information and did what we could to implement the first round of development for an updated wholesale finder. And so that was actually launched just last May, our revised version of the wholesale finder with all of that feedback implemented. And so there are a lot of changes. I would invite you to check out the wholesale finder. And if you have questions, we do have a table out there. But I want to make sure we have enough time for Elaine, because she's got some great information to share. I'm going to skip through this data about the surveys, but if you do have questions about any of that, happy to talk about it. One thing that I learned, we did a similar panel in November at the TILF conference, where Annette Slonim, who is now in the role that Chris had at Farm to School for WSDA, that through her work with a lot of the ESDs that are supporting procurement of local food around the state, especially in rural areas, is that 25% of them in 2023 were utilizing the wholesale finder to originate their searches for product. We don't have information for 2024 yet, but we know that there's going to be an increase. So that was really helpful to hear. And as Chris mentioned, these are the indicators, the values indicators that we determined from all of the stakeholder surveys that we did. So accessibility, animal welfare, environmental sustainability, fair labor, racial and social equity, cultural relevance, and health are the high-level categories. Underneath these, Elliot, if you could hit the next slide. This is very tiny. I know you probably can't see it, but each of those has a number of other nested filters underneath them. So we divided out a lot of different identity indicators. One of the things that we heard was, people wanted to support BIPOC producers, but also they wanted an option to not lump all of those producers into that BIPOC category. And so that category became separated out and can be searched and filtered both ways. We included some new cultural relevance filters, halal and kosher. I can't tell you how many times in the past few weeks that I've been at conferences, I've had people coming up to me saying, I have a local food purchasing agreement and I'm looking for halal meat. Can you help me? There is no other resource that I'm aware of in the state that is working on this. It is not perfect, I will tell you that right now. There are a lot of people missing, hoping that a lot of you will help us to get more farms and businesses listed, especially if they are falling in any of these categories, because we want to get food to people that are looking for it. So next slide, thank you. So this is the relaunched version of the Washington Food and Farm Finder. This is from the consumer end. We're talking a lot about wholesale procurement, but we're also working on a direct-to-consumer level and running campaigns throughout the year to try and keep local food top of mind for communities. Next. This is a screenshot of the wholesale finder. We also did some substantial updates to make sure that it functions well on mobile. That was one of the biggest requests, is it was built for desktop, but it wasn't very mobile friendly. So this is a desktop screenshot, but test it out on your phone. It does work a lot better. As you can see, lots of filtering options by location, by certification. Go ahead. Oh, okay, that's all for me. So I'm gonna pass it to Elaine, but if you do have any other questions for me, come check in with me later.
Hello, I'm Elaine Krogfoss, and I'm from the Bainbridge Island School District. I'm the Food and Nutrition Director. I started with Bainbridge Island 3 years ago and got a $10,000 grant for a plant foods-based grant. And with that, we started a farm-to-school program, and over the last 3 years, have been able to purchase locally by doing some very different purchasing things. We are currently able to buy most of our proteins with entitlement monies, whole proteins like ground beef, stew meat, bison, salmon. So with those entitlement monies, we can purchase all of those proteins, which we were purchasing from our food producers. But now we can buy local, we can take that money and spend it locally with local farmers, local dairies, local ranchers. So we have been able to continue with our farm to school program even though we're not getting any funding for it. Next slide. Part of the farm to school program is the 3 C's, classroom, cafeteria, and community. Community is the big piece that we all need in order to have a successful farm to school program. The community meaning everybody that we purchase from, the community meaning the family members that are sending their kids to school, and the children that are being able to eat nutritious local foods. Next slide. 49% of Washington school districts surveyed by the USDA say that they participate in farm to school activities, representing 1,183 schools and 542,145 students statewide. Next slide. This is just some pictures of what we do. That's a curry that's been made from winter squash, pumpkin muffins. That's our chef, Jason and Danny. And that's just a sample of the roasted squash that had just come out of the oven. Next picture. For value-added procurement, we also look to be able to subsidize some of our fresh local produce. So if we can get a minimally processed chicken thigh meat, then we would definitely be able to purchase that so that we could continue with scratch cooking, but also not have such labor intensive. Next slide. It's just a picture of one of the salads that was made at the school for service. And that's a delivery of our squash, our fall order of our 1,500 pounds of fresh winter squash. You can see that Jason is extremely excited about being able to roast all that off again this year. Next slide. This is our Taste of Washington Day. Those chicken legs are what I'm talking about when it's minimally processed. It's just seasoned, but it comes in pre-cooked. And so then we could focus on the rainbow carrots that we purchased through the Puget Sound Food Hub. And that's what we focus on for our Taste of Washington Day, or rainbow carrots. And that's just a picture of Stacy and Joanne serving our students. Next slide, that might be it. Is that it? Yeah. Okay.
We're good. Yeah. Thank you, Elaine. We're going to talk just for 10 minutes so then we can all talk. But I guess I want to start with a big question, y'all, about each of you operates differently and you're in different positions, as is, I'm sure, everybody here. But money is a real thing. And so just for the sake of everybody understanding a little bit more from your perspective, how do you balance cost limits, and maybe we'll start with you, Elaine, cost and values when it comes to the procurement you're doing or supporting in your role?
So when you purchase locally, like for instance, I get 40 pounds of oak leaf lettuce every week from a local farm. That lettuce actually lasts for 2 weeks, and it goes further. The students love it. It's more nutritious. It's being able to keep it local and to help the rest of our community thrive as well.
Well, I wanted actually in Anthony's stead, since he's not here, we wanted to have, just to call the question kind of just a food business, private sector, food service company too, and I want to call that too, well, we're talking a lot about, publicly funded food programs, schools, and some of the city's programs, but the wholesale finder, though, too, isn't just for schools. So if you're a food business, a restaurant, 84% of that $6 billion yearly is spent at just restaurants, right? Food service, grocery, a lot of that, too. So just want to bring that perspective in. I know Elliot works a lot with those folks, and I think that a lot of you here, right, are just doing that local food economy work, too, which is super important. And I'll just add to the question about balancing cost and values to, I guess, point out that a values-based purchase isn't always more expensive. That's actually, they've done studies, and not a ton, but some national studies to find out that sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. It actually depends what the product is, who the suppliers are, and I've actually heard from Seattle Public Schools, especially during COVID, when supply chains were broken, they found that, sometimes things are more expensive. Sometimes they're trying to buy local because it's cheaper. To just trying to find those opportunities. If you have to be budget neutral, as we call it in the public sector, or balance the costs, that there's ways to do it, and balance out maybe some of the other ingredients that might be coming in to offset if there is a more expensive product you're trying to source.
To Chris's point, we try to work with any potential buyer and provide a source for discovering local food options. We work with food hubs. I see Ed in the back, and everything down to really small mom and pop restaurants. And there are, I think, more opportunities that are less transactional through a website or an online ordering platform, that once those relationships begin, then you can have other conversations about how to meet longer term budgetary goals of, okay, I know I'm going to need these items, or I'd really like to have these items, and we're seeing relationships for planning of cropping to produce things at the right price point and the right scale. But that starts somewhere, right? So that's a really big part of our work too. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Thank y'all. Yeah, I think we definitely want to strike a balance here, and we've got a lot of conversation that does, as Chris suggested, sounds like it's focused on public sector, but you are all part of this conversation as much as we are. And so to that end, I think just to broaden the aperture a bit, y'all, like we're trying to grow and sustain this work at a time, see previous session, and amidst the deluge of challenge, it strikes me that it matters a lot to be in touch with why we do this work and what compels us to go through, Elaine, in your case, like, why do all that extra work? It's an important and very personal answer, so I want to ask a two-part question. One is, of all the things there are to do in this world and problems that we could focus on, why do you do the work you do? And where do you see opportunities for institutions, public or private, to advance this values-based procurement work in the moment we're in now?
Why do I do this work? Well, there's not anything more joyful than serving students nutritious meals.
Yeah, and like, where do you see opportunities for institutions like yours or others?
Well, I think there's a lot of opportunities, especially once you get out and you're doing the face-to-face contacts with farmers, with local vendors, with it's kind of like this whole community starts to grow. And now, in the times that we're in now, this community gets bigger and it gets stronger, and we're going to support one another. We have a second grader whose family works for a Hispanic restaurant there on the island, and he's scared, He's scared that what's going to happen, what's going to be in the near future. Well, as a community, we need to come together and reassure our students, our families, that there's food, that there's nutritious food, that there's warmth in what we do, right? There is family in what we do. So that's my why. I just want to take a minute to wish my wife a happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary. Why do I do what I do? So my dad was a serial entrepreneur in the .com era. And like it or not, I learned how to design websites. I learned how to do sales and marketing and SEO back before anybody knew what SEO was. But I did not like the clientele that I was working with at the time because I lived in Las Vegas. I tell people this, that I think when one of my dad's clients was VIPclubbing.com, I was like, I'm out, I'm done. This is not for me. But I do have that skill set, and when I moved to Washington State, I moved and ended up in Whatcom County and was surrounded by just the most amazing community of local food and agriculture, and I'm fortunate to work for a nonprofit organization, Sustainable Connections, that hosts an annual farm tour. And getting that experience to go travel around to 12 different farms, put my feet on the soil, and taste the food that was grown lovingly by this community transformed me and gave me purpose. And I landed a great job with 25% working with Whatcom Farm to School and getting to see my kids do Taste Test Tuesdays and work with their school gardens. And I just want to say again, this isn't just about transactions. This is about the holistic community aspect. And local procurement for foods also is interconnected with school gardens and kids getting the opportunity to grow their own food and learn about their food system. And it is absolutely crucial for the future of agriculture. We have to have kids that are interested in growing food and can see it as a viable lifestyle and career. So that's the opportunity, and that's why I do it.
I'll just add, I think the attacks of the current federal administration on so many communities, just makes this work more important than ever. I think it's time to get stuck in. I think part of why I do this work is because I do think supply chain, better food system, better supply chains, more values-aligned supply chains can be a way to address climate change and address issues in the food economy, to advance racial equity, to advance more equitable solutions and fair solutions for so many different communities that are negatively impacted by those right now. And especially for publicly funded food programs, I think we have an obligation to reinvest those funds in ways that support a more sustainable, equitable food system, and also feed people, right? And also address folks that are food insecure and increase food access. So. I just think it's more important, now more than ever, to build solidarity across the supply chain, really, urban-rural solidarity too, and kind of build those communities around how we're getting food to people's plates.
Yeah, thank y'all. By my watch, we got 15 minutes for questions. I already see one in the back here, but let's open it up. Yeah. And I'll repeat the question.
So Ryan Sardis with Mountaineer Creamery. We're a small little organic creamery in Kennesaw, Washington. A quick training today was from us, and there'll be chocolate milk, by the way. So I work with an organic conference. Okay. Sorry. Can you hear that? Is that on? So I'm on the Western Organic Producers Board for dairy, and one of the issues is the national rules for milk in school is, in my opinion, garbage 1%. And so my question would be for you guys in the local food system within Washington State or within the school district, can you circumvent that to get whole milk? Because nutrition facts for whole milk are pretty amazing. We do a non-homogenized. I have kids now that have lactose intolerant issues that now can drink milk, and adults who have come to us and said they haven't been able to drink milk for 30 years. So there's a value there, and nutritionally and organically also, but the school district policy and national-wide policy is cheap and crappy, sorry. So how does the local infrastructure work through that? And then, of course, like you said, we're a higher price because we're small. We're not doing millions of gallons a year. So that would be my first question, would be how does locals deal with that?
Well, unfortunately, there isn't a lot that we can do about the regulations that are set forth on what we're allowed to serve in the schools. Is what I can tell you is that I try to go through and do local yogurts and different things like that to be able to help with the local dairy farmers. And cheese vendors, but as far as changing those rules, there isn't anything that we can do at the school level.
They do revisit those nutrition standards, though. So not to get too boring, National School Lunch Program set those standards. I don't know about 1% milk in particular, but a variety of sodium limits and other things. They take public comment. They go through a process of trying to set and update those rules. So that might come up in the future of looking at those nutrition standards again, just to mention that.
As a value-added food producer, my question came up was, do the individual districts or is it statewide setting prices on products that they want to purchase? Say, they have a budget for 7,000 gallons of milk, and they're going to portion out that to, of cents per unit? Is that something that you need to know as a food producer going in to say, I have to lower my expectations of profit on this? And then is there a negotiation process to say, I have a set wholesale price for a unit, and larger production, obviously, without packaging would be a difference in that, but how would one go about that to not have sticker shock or underbid the project?
What's your per meal reimbursement rate?
So, based upon what the product is, again, we take a look at what we're utilizing from entitlement monies, and then what we can spend to create those scratch quick meals and be able to elevate that. So, I guess when you're asking me, what do I look at? I look at what the product is. I look at how minimally processed it is. I look at ingredients, and if it's a good fit for what we're doing in the district. The best way to be able to find that out is to, we can chat after this or whatever, so that I can give you an idea of how that process works. Okay?
Do you have anything, Elliot, on that?
There is such a thing as fit, and that's the case when you go to the grocery store, Like, there's a lot of stuff I walk into PCC and say, man, that would be awesome, but, like, I'm not about to spend $12 for 2 heads of bright pink radicchio. It would be amazing, but I can't afford that right now. Everybody's in that same boat, so, yeah, there's reason to be suspicious, but hopeful.
I've got something to add to that. As a restaurant operator and farm operator on Bainbridge Island with a footprint there. About 12 years ago, we worked to target funds for the school district, just working with the community. When people were asking us to fundraise, I said, sure, but instead of just buying new laptops, we wanted to involve school lunch and going to the food, to feed students local farm food. So it might seem self-serving as a dairy operator or a food producer, but if you have an opportunity in your community to raise money, if people are asking you to donate gift certificates or a farm dinner or something like that for the schools foundation, we were able to put together, I think it was about 20 grand for 2 years in a row to target something they called edible education. And the idea was to grow food on the farm or at school. But the short answer is if you're involved in your community and you can try to leverage money that's going to the school district and then tell them where you want it to go, maybe they can afford to buy the milk,
Let's go. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd just like to throw out too that, we all heard the grant situation right now, but there are local food purchasing grants that schools are getting in the state of Washington, and some of them have a lot fewer restrictions, so folks can buy bigger quantities, they can pay a more fair price for things, and depending on where it falls in a threshold of the $10,000 and whatnot, sometimes they have to get bids from other folks and sometimes they don't. And I think, my husband worked for the Bellingham Public Schools in that role, and he also was able to just make some decisions about, maybe we can't do this milk every day, but maybe we could do it once a month. And so it's supporting farmers. It may not be the thing that they can do every day, but it's still worth making those connections with folks in schools. And I just want to put out there too, he's still working with a lot of the ESDs, and these are small school districts like Freeman, Washington, and teeny tiny towns that are doing this work and buying from local farms. So don't think that you have to be in Seattle or some bigger city to be able to sell to school districts. I would encourage you to go out and talk to the chefs in those schools and see what they have available to spend on local food.
Thanks, Jim.
I'm a butcher, and I own a couple of, this is about value-based purchasing. And one of the things that, as I've grown my businesses, one of the things that I see is a thing where butcher shops, they'll say, well, yeah, we're local, and they'll order box meats from the Midwest, and they'll cut it local, and they'll call it local. They'll sell rib steaks for $19.99 a pound. We can't even purchase wholesale from a good distributor, the ones that we're trying to support, We can't even purchase rib steaks for $19.99 a pound. So because in order to support those local farmers, we have to charge $36.99 a pound. And now we look like crazy people because all the other butcher shops are, yeah, we're local, and they can hide under what we're trying to do, because there's people where this really matters. And like animal welfare, that's a real thing to some people. And so we're trying to provide that avenue, but it does us no good when all these other butcher shops can try to look like us and try to sound like us, but they don't care. And I get it, that business is tough, but you should say, this is regional beef, or this is beef from the Midwest. And believe me, I'm rooting for all farmers, but I'm rooting for our local farmers first. Like, that's who should come first, and much like eat local first. And so this is more on the retail aspect of things, and a little bit hard to deal with, but like it for me, I'll see Facebook posts like, hey, where's the best place to find a local, rib roast? And it's in a butcher shop that I know for a fact that's never sold a local steak ever. I went by one butcher shop, on their sign it says Farm Fresh, and next to that sign was a box of IBP boxes 20 feet long. Now people will drive to that butcher shop and pass pastures on the way there and say, oh, well, maybe my meat comes from one of these nice little farms here. Nowhere close. Those animals are factory farmed, shot up with every type of hormone ever. And they can find that same meat in their local Safeway.
Yeah.
So that value that people are trying to find, it doesn't get represented for people who are producing.
Yeah, I have one thought, and Chris has a thought on this too. Greenwashing is a problem. It happens everywhere. And so this is where Eat Local First will always say, in our work with campaigns and promoting local food, we ask restaurants and retailers to name the farms. It's not enough to say local. Call out who your source is, and we want to amplify that. And there are other tools that we have on eatlocalfirst.org where we're working to try and connect the dots for consumers. If it's a restaurant and they're calling themselves farm to table, we're giving them an opportunity to list the producers that they're sourcing from and hyperlink to their listing so people can learn and understand. And we need people like you in our communities and in the organizations we work with to say, you're local? Cool, tell me. Where? Where'd you get it? Like, ask people. Call them out on social media. Like, we do it in a very nice way, but we know that's a problem. It's not going to go anywhere, but the transparency and the traceability is important, and that's a big part of what we're here for.
Yeah, I was mostly going to say the same thing. That authenticity, integrity, of marketing claims, super important. The specificity helps, right? To have resources and make those demands, make those requests. Like, tell me more about your local meat or where you claim it comes from, to try to hold people a little bit more to that. Because the co-optation is real, as whether it's organic or sustainable or even other claims that folks are making, whether it's grocery or restaurant and beyond. I think that's important.
My name is Jessica, and I'm with Ag West, and we're on the east side of Washington. And I'm just curious in terms of supply and demand from the buyers versus the farmers, if you can provide some insights on where that balance is, because we work with a lot of farmers that are looking for new markets. And if you're saying, we would need more farmers, it would help us because the buyers don't have enough supply, that would be terrific, because we would do some outreach with our growers to say, hey, check out Local First as an example, because we're just so encouraged with what the ESD programs have been doing to help our local farmers. It's a two-part question, though, because secondarily, so if we go back and say, hey, this is definitely a viable opportunity, and then they go there, what kind of onboarding do you have to help make sure that it's successful for them, especially for the newer growers that are just getting started with some of these bigger supply channels?
Yeah, so there's a lot of questions there. Supply and demand, maybe Elliot has some thoughts on that. I would say, we are working to build more representation on the Washington Food and Farm Finder to make sure that folks are represented. What I wanted to say is this is not my area of expertise, but the Washington State Department of Agriculture Farm to School program, Annette Slonim, if you're not connected with her and that program, anybody that's doing this work should be. There are community of practice calls that happen every 2 months. Producers are invited, buyers are invited, community organizations are invited to ask these questions and learn about what the opportunities and some of the inroads are. There's a lot of strategic and creative ways, but there's no silver bullet. I'll let you.
No, I mean, that's a 9-hour conversation, so let's talk. But there's always demand. I think there's a takeaway for me in all this, and this probably we'll leave it here because we don't want to be between people and lunch. Be skeptical. Like, be critical consumers, whether you're going to your grocery stores or your kids are going to schools, and ask for the data. Like, no one's forcing you to do this. No one's forcing people to do that. Like, but you can't pretend like not doing it allows you to also claim you're doing it, to your point. You know, there is such a thing as yes and no at a point. And if we as consumers continue to insist on being able to know how much is that farm, not just who's the farm, but are they being paid well? Let's normalize that conversation. Because then the answers will tell you what you need, you know? Talk is cheap. But yeah, I think we'll leave it there. Thanks so much for being here, and thanks to the panelists. Really great. Come ask questions.
I know there's a lot more questions you have. Feel free to seek out the panel members in the buffet line and your networking opportunities over the next hour. Thank you so much for coming.